What happens when worshipping a god becomes a crime? In the world of the Elder Scrolls, this isn't just a hypothetical question, it's a political reality that sparked a brutal civil war and tore an empire apart. A mortal man ascended to godhood, was worshipped for centuries, and then suddenly, by the stroke of a pen, his faith was outlawed. Hi guys, my name is Jason. I'm a fantasy author who builds shared universes, and I'm fascinated with how all of this world building fits together in my favorite franchises like the Elder Scrolls. And this channel, Lore TV, is all about exploring that rich lore. And today we're diving into the Imperial Pantheon, the 9 Divines, and how the controversial 9th member, Talos, went from emperor to god to forbidden deity. Our story begins not with 9 gods, but with 8, and a very smart political compromise. In the early days of the First Era, a former slave named Alessia led a massive rebellion, freeing humanity from the cruel dominion of their elven masters, the Aelids. But her victory presented a new problem. Her own people, the Cyrodiils, had adopted many of the elven gods, while her crucial allies, the Nords of Skyrim, had their own distinct pantheon. And forcing either side to abandon their faith would have torn her new empire apart before it even began. So, Alessia did something rather brilliant. She synthesized the two pantheons. She identified the common archetypes, the mother goddess, the god of death, the god of time, and blended them into a single unified religion known as the 8 Divines. This new faith was inclusive enough to appease both sides and became the bedrock of the Cyrodiilic Empire for thousands of years. The original 8 divines were Akatosh, the dragon god of time, Arche, the god of the cycle of life and death, Dibella, the goddess of beauty, Julianos, the god of wisdom and logic, Kinnereth, the goddess of air and nature, Mara, the mother goddess of love and compassion, Stendar, the god of mercy and justice, and Zenithar, the god of work and commerce. This pantheon was the official state religion for millennia. It was stable, it was accepted, and it was peaceful. But the thing about peace is it rarely lasts. Centuries later, a man was born who would change everything, and his name was Tiber Septim, a warlord of almost mythical skill and ambition. Through conquest and political maneuvering, he forged the Third Empire, uniting all of the scattered provinces of Tamriel under a single banner for the first time in history. His achievements were so monumental and his impact so profound that upon his death, he was said to have achieved apotheosis. The mortal man became a god, taking his place in the heavens alongside the original 8. He was now Talos, the hero god of mankind, and with his ascension, the 8 divines became 9. Praise the 9 became a common blessing across the empire he had built. Talos became the patron of the empire itself, a symbol of humanity's strength and its right to rule. But his addition to the pantheon planted the seed of a conflict that would one day bloom into open war. Because while the races of men celebrated his divinity, the elves saw it as the ultimate blasphemy. For centuries, the 9 divines were worshipped without issue, but the empire's power eventually began to wane. By the 4th era, a new power had risen in the south, the Aldmeri Dominion, a formidable empire of high elves who saw themselves as the rightful rulers of Tamriel and viewed humanity as little more than upstart usurpers. War was inevitable. The Great War, as it came to be known, and it was a brutal, continent-spanning conflict that brought the empire to its knees. The Dominion even managed to sack the imperial city itself. Though the empire eventually reclaimed its capital, it was too weak to continue the fight, so they were forced to the negotiating table. The peace treaty that they signed, known as the White-Gold Concordat, was a humiliating defeat. The Aldmeri Dominion made several demands, but one in particular was designed to be a dagger to the heart of the empire and its people: the worship of Talos, which was to be outlawed. The man who founded the empire was to be stripped of his godhood. Weakened and desperate for peace, the empire agreed. Officially, the 9 divines were once again the 8. Thalmor agents, the Dominion's feared secret police, were given permission to roam imperial lands, enforcing the ban and imprisoning or executing anyone caught worshipping Talos. And to add insult to injury, the Dominion greenlit the distribution of a book called The Talos Mistake, an imperial-penned piece of propaganda arguing that removing Talos was the right thing to do, that his worship only weakened the faith in the true divines. For the Nords of Skyrim, who had wholeheartedly embraced Talos and considered him a son of Skyrim, this was the ultimate betrayal. Banning the worship of their greatest hero, the very founder of the empire that they were sworn to serve, it was an insult that they could not bear. This single clause in a peace treaty sparked a fire of rebellion that would engulf the entire province, leading directly to the Stormcloak Rebellion and the bloody civil war depicted in the game Skyrim. the worship of a god had become an act of treason. Now, quick thing before we continue. I know you're busy. You've got a backlog of games to play and a watch list a mile long. I get it, so I'm not selling you anything. I run a completely free fantasy community over on School. When you join, you immediately get 4 of my books, a mix of short stories and novellas, for free, no strings attached. If you decide my writing isn't for you, no hard feelings, you can leave. You've lost a couple of seconds. And if you love it, you can check out the paid tiers to get more books and support the channel. The link is right down below. It takes about 30 seconds to sign up. Now back to the gods. So why did the Aldmeri Dominion despise Talos so much? Why was his worship such a sticking point that they were willing to go to war over it and then enforce its ban so brutally? The answer lies at the very core of how men and elves see the world. Most elven races, or Mer, believe they are the direct descendants of the gods, the Aedra. Their creation myth tells of a time when they were immortal spirits tricked by the god Lorcan into creating the mortal world, a process which trapped them in flesh and robbed them of their divinity. To them, the world is a prison and mortality is a curse. Their ultimate goal is to undo this creation and return to their divine state. The races of men, on the other hand, have a different perspective. They generally believe they were created by the gods, and that the mortal world, while difficult, is a gift, a place to prove their worth. So when a man, a member of a race they considered lesser, not only conquers the continent but then ascends to godhood, it's not just an insult, it's heresy. Talos' divinity is a direct contradiction to the elves' entire religion and racial worldview, and it suggests that a human can achieve a state that their supposedly superior descendants of the gods, have lost. In their eyes, Tiber Septim is a thief who stole a divine station that was their birthright. For the Dominion, stripping Talos of his godhood isn't really just a political power play. It's all about reasserting what they believe is the natural order of the cosmos. But there was another layer to this. Was Tiber Septim even worthy of being a god? The official imperial histories portray him as a heroic unifier, but other more obscure texts, like the one titled The Arcturian Heresy, tells a much darker story. They claim Tiber Septim, born as a man named Hjalti, was a ruthless traitor. These histories say he murdered his king to seize power, then betrayed and killed his own loyal battle mage, trapping his soul in a gem to power the Numidium, an ancient dwarven super weapon that he used to crush all opposition. According to this version of events, he didn't unite Tamriel through honor, he conquered it through bloodshed, deceit, and an all-consuming lust for power. And if these stories are true, it makes the entire conflict far more complicated. Were the Stonecloaks fighting for a noble god and religious freedom, or were they fighting for the legacy of a blood-soaked tyrant? In the world of the Elder Scrolls, history is written by the victors, and the truth is often buried under centuries of myth and propaganda. The pantheons of Tamriel are a perfect example of how lore can add incredible depth to a world. And as a reminder, if you want to see how I try to build that kind of depth in my own fantasy universe, you can go join my free community on School and get instant access to 4 of my books. The link is down below. And I'll see you in the next video.